prohibits sexual extortion.
Chair recognizes Chairman Setzler to explain the Senate amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, Senate Bill 9 is a combination of Senator Jones's bill, which addresses the issue of sextortion, as well as a bill we addressed to address unlawful sexual contact between teachers and students. This bill passed out of the House unanimously last week, and the Senate changed one word that restores it, a line back to existing law, and changed one fine. That's all that's been changed in this bill, and Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to take questions.
You have no questions?
Urge your favorable support to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 9.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 9, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 149, the nays are 2. This House has agreed to the Senate amendment to Senate Bill 9. Chair recognizes Representative Rich for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 492.
Chair Representative Rich has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 492. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 492 to be entitled an act to amend Article 3, Chapter 7, Title 44 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to dispossessory proceedings.
Chair recognizes Representative Rich to explain the Senate substitute to House Bill 492.
The Senate substitute to House Bill 492 just corrects a scrivener's error. It deletes the word landlord from the last subsection where it is not applicable. The word landlord should not have been there. So there are no real substantive changes. And unless there are questions, I will just ask for your favorable consideration and yield the well.
You have no questions. On the lady's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 492, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the lady's motion, the ayes are 155, the nays are 2. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 492. Chair recognizes Chairman F. Stration for a motion.
I move that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 381.
Chair recognizes Chairman Evstration to
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
explain his motion.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 381 is the child support update recommended by the Child Support Commission, passed this body overwhelmingly. The Senate simply removed a provision that would take out the alimony calculation as part of the child support worksheet, but otherwise the bill maintains cleanup language. The impute language for 40-hour work week at minimum wage, which was updated in federal law, federal regulation is now updated here. And finally, it provides for if benefits are received, that calculation will be included in the worksheet. So very not controversial whatsoever as it was reviewed, and I support the Senate changes. Would ask you to agree to House Bill 381 as substituted in the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Mr. Clerk, you want to read the caption before we get too far down the road here?
House Bill 381 to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 19615 relating to child support guidelines for determining the amount of award.
Okay, did you yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative McLeod to your left for a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Does this include the unborn fetus?
No, ma'am. This is unrelated to House Bill 481. This bill is only with respect to the child support update. And what this bill does is it, first of all, includes for either judge or jury in child support calculations, because those are ultimately a jury decision if the parties decide to go that route. Also, it updates, as I mentioned, that benefits received by one of the parties may be included in the child support calculation. And finally, it includes it removes the imputed income as being explicitly stated where the court may impute with a certain standard. It was not required. Simply removes that, which is consistent with federal regulation. And as I understand it, it is also related to drawdown dollars for the state.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds like 481 to me.
Well, I believe the Child Support Commission would very much disagree with you. Okay. I'll yield for other questions if there are any.
Do you yield for more questions?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know about how much child support is overdue in the state of Georgia, or about how much has been garnished in
No,
the
I don't.
past years? Okay. Thank you.
I'll
No
yield.
further questions.
All right, yield the will.
On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 381, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 154, the nays are 3. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 381. Chair recognizes Chairman Werkheiser for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we agree to Senate substitute House Bill 373 as amended. By the House.
Chairman Werkheiser has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 373 as amended by this House. Clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 373 to be titled an act to amend Title 34 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to labor and industrial relations so as to change certain provisions relating to the Department of Labor and Employment Security.
Chair recognizes Chairman Werkheiser to explain the Senate substitute and the amendment.
House Bill 373 is the annual legislative package from the Department of Labor. Section 2 is the carryover from last year. It allows the Labor Commissioner to require background checks for employees who have access to federal returns. This is a requirement from our federal government, and we've already done this for other agencies. This measure actually passed both the House and the Senate overwhelmingly, but got caught up in another measure last year. Section 3 restores the statute method of payment to employees, that it shall be at the discretion of the employer. Section 4 is simply a software update that allows the department to collect data reporting in 52 batches instead of 365. Section 5 simplifies the minimum unemployment benefits by establishing a floor for partial days, and that raises the current rate for the weekly rate from 300 to 365. Section 6 is a requirement of a written statement with regards to the attendance policy regarding claims has been removed since the policy is already part of the employer's policy. Per a question last time we had this bill, it does not affect the Family Medical Leave Act. Section 7 reflects how overpayments, false statements, and representations are handled. There is an amendment. Section 8 is in here, but Chairman Blackman has an amendment that will strip Section 8. I've heard from many of you that have an issue with moving the Workforce Development Board for the fourth time in 5 years. And then secondly, and probably most importantly, it would remove the legislature from the process. So with that, I agree with the amendment.
Are you yielding for questions?
I'll yield for a question.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question.
Thank you. Do you yield?
Absolutely.
Thank you. In section 2, as it talks about criminal background checks, it includes an arrest as well as a charge and sentencing. Can you help me understand the difference between an arrest, a charge, and a sentencing?
I have no idea. This is standard language from the federal government that we did last year with the Department of Revenue, and I don't know what the other department was, but it's the same language that we do with all the departments regarding background checks.
Do you further yield?
Sure.
So then do you understand that there could be significant impacts if you have an arrest on your record but you're not convicted, but someone is still seeing that?
So actually, in the commissioner, we talked about that in committee. They will, as long as the prospective employee or current employee is honest, and the charge would have no influence on the position that they're either applying for or currently involved in, it would not matter.
Thank you. Do you further yield?
Sure.
So on section 5, as it speaks to the maximum weekly benefits, can you speak to what either our neighboring states or our peer states, based on population or unemployment statistics, does for their maximum weekly benefit?
I cannot speak to what other states do. I just know that raising it from 300 to 365 seems like a generous increase. Do what?
Do you yield for one further question?
Sure.
Chair recognizes the Majority Caucus Whip, Representative Kelly, to your right for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Isn't it true, Mr. Chairman, that the provisions that we're talking about with the wrap back provisions would just allow, we're making no policy change in terms of which arrests or charges, but we're only allowing it to be viewed in a more real-time manner. Is that not correct?
I thought that's exactly the way I explained it, but but that is correct.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and I yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Is there any objection to the adoption of the House amendment? The chair hears none, and the House amendment is adopted. On the gentleman's motion that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 373 as amended by this House, all those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the gentleman's motion, the ayes are 159. The nays are 1. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 373 as amended by this House. Chair recognizes Chairman Powell for an announcement. Yeah.
The Rules Committee will meet in 341 for a brief meeting right now.
This House will be in recess for 10 minutes. House will come back to order. House will come back to order. Mr. Clerk, you want to ring the bell? Clerk will read the caption to a privilege resolution.
Honoring the service of Carol E. Williams, Raven County GOP, for many years of hard work and dedication of the people of Raven County.
Is there any objection to adopting the privilege resolution? The chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Saines for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to accept the Senate substitute for House Bill 470. Thank you.
Representative Saines has moved that this House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 470. Although clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 470 be titled an act to amend Article 6A of Chapter 3 of Title 35, the official code of George Ann Taylor relating to DNA sampling collection and analysis, so as to provide for analysis and collection of DNA for individuals charged with a felony offense.
Chair recognizes Representative Saines to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill has mostly been left as is. It again goes back and takes felony first offenders back to where they were prior to 2016. It allows for collection for felony first offenders, and that has resulted in a match in the last 2 years which we've been unable to collect in more than 120 matches. The Senate substitute strengthens language to ensure that Georgia is not unintentionally putting a loophole to collect on misdemeanor cases. So again, it only applies to felony first offenders, and after they're done with the provision of their first offender status, it will be automatically, without a requirement to request, that DNA will be taken out of the sample. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll yield for questions if there is any.
You have no questions?
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry, you do have a question. Do you yield?
I do.
Chair recognizes Representative Jasmine Clark for a question to your left.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Over here. On line 40, where it says charged with a felony, does that mean that the DNA collection can happen before conviction?
No, this bill only applies to those who have been sentenced for felony first offenders.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do. One more question.
Chair recognizes Representative Cannon to your left for a question. She waves.
Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 470, all those in favor will vote yes, those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 126, the nays are 29. This House has agreed to the Senate substitute to House Bill 470. Chair recognizes Chairman Welch for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House agree to Senate substitute to House Bill 502.
Chairman Welch has moved that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 502. The clerk will read the caption.
House Bill 502 to be titled an act to amend Article 7 of Chapter 10 of Title 9 and Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 17 of the Official Code of Georgia and Taylor relating to continuances, so as revised continuances for members of the Board of Regents and the Attorney General.
Chair recognizes Chairman Welch to explain the Senate substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On House Bill 502, what we have added to, or what the Senate has added to the bill, is amendments dealing with legislative leave. This would address attorneys on legislative leave through the General Assembly. In particular, there are two aspects I'd like to point out for the members. Number one is there are two legislative leave provisions, one in the Civil Practice Act in Title 9, and the other is in the Criminal Procedures Act, Title 17. And in that, we have taken the committee's language, the committee that the Speaker had appointed to look at legislative leave, and we've inserted that language into this bill in the Senate. The language was vetted by the Special Duty Senate Committee, and in the process going through rules, changes were added to the bill. Specifically, instead of, and let me go back up just a second. The additional language would require that a member of this House, when we are not in session, who is an attorney practicing law, would need to move the court for a continuance. And if there's objection to that continuance, that can be levied by opposing counsel or a party to the case, or in the case of a criminal action, a victim to that criminal action. If any of those object to that, then there can be a hearing and a determination as to whether or not that continuance will be granted. It is important to note that an individual that is going to submit for the continuance has to file a certification specifying with particularity what legislative duties are being implicated by that continuance. That is true in both the civil part and the criminal part of the bill. However, I would point out that in the course of the amendments, the Senate had added an amendment that dealt in the civil section, in the civil section only, to specify that legislative leave was possible for national conferences, caucus meetings, and special study committees. That's only in the civil section. That is not in the criminal section. And those are the changes that were made by the Senate to the underlying bill of House Bill 502. And with that, I would ask for your favorable consideration of the Senate substitute to House Bill 502. Thank you.
On the gentleman's motion that the House agree to the Senate substitute to House Bill 502, all those in favor of the motion will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the gentleman's motion. The ayes are 162. The nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite this House has agreed to the Senate substitute House Bill 502. Chair recognizes Chairman Welch. This House will be at order. I'm going to ask all members that are in the chamber to please be seated. The chair recognizes Chairman Andy Welch for a morning order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and in a few hours we will be at morning. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve in the Georgia House of Representatives for 9 sessions. This will be my last. I will be stepping down from the position after session at a date to be determined, but I wanted to express my gratitude to the members of this House, each and every one of you. It is a rare opportunity that we have to sit in this body and to do what cannot and has not been done in Congress for decades, which is to sit here and deliberate, discuss, socialize, get to know each other's families, how many children you have, what their ages are, where you live, where you like to eat. If only we could have that discourse everywhere else in the world, and particularly in Congress, but that doesn't exist. I think it's because we socialize, because we discuss about other matters, family matters, things, common bonds that bring us together, that we are successful in legislating. The freedom of movement within this chamber, the discussions that we've had in this chamber about legislation, Pat and I debating legislation, jokingly, facetiously, seriously, and her wanting me to change my vote and pleading with me to do so, and me likewise. But it's just that kind of thing that we're honored to do that, and it's a privilege. It's rare, and I just wanted to tell you how much that means to me to have that, for us to have that dialogue, and that builds a family relationship within this body. Granted, we have differences on policy, but because we talk, because we socialize, because we gather together, because we spend hours and hours here in this chamber and in the ante rooms together, it builds those bonds of cooperation. But I wanted to thank first my constituents for sending me up here time and time again. I owe them a debt of gratitude for giving me the opportunity to serve here. I want to thank my wife and children, because if they hadn't agreed year after year, then I wouldn't be here. Every session before I would sign up to run again, we would have a family gathering, and I would sit there with them, my 2 daughters and my son, and I would ask them, okay, now's the time to make a decision. Do you want Daddy to come home and be at home more, or do you want him to go back up to the Gold Dome? Made that simple. It wasn't complicated, right? And most every time it was, oh, Dad, go back up to the Gold Dome. We're happy. The last go around was, yeah, exactly. Leave us alone. We don't want you bothering us with homework. Last year it was, we had some no votes on coming back up. And if you can't win an election in your household, you better not be running up here, I can tell you that. I want to thank my colleagues, my friends that I've developed, particularly here. My seatmates, Ron and Butch, thank you for being dear friends. Mary Margaret, thank you for being a dear friend for many years. And there are many others that I'd like to express my gratitude. You remember old Tom Weldon, and he's tacking on, right? And so I'm going to tack on a few more, but I've developed some very good friendships here. But I can tell you this, one thing that you have to do this job well is you have to have the trust of your colleagues in this room. And I hope I've earned that from you, because that means the most. If you can't walk around this building and people know that you're trustworthy, I think you have a very short and unhappy career in this building. And I think that's true for people in this room and people in the hallways. Ms. Pamela Lewis, my AA, has been a dear friend, a bellwether of good conscience and a good perspective on what we do here. And I'm going to miss her dearly. The members of Legislative Council, the staff members, the doorkeepers, I'm going to miss shaking your hand. I'm going to miss saying hello to you. I'm going to miss Angela in the ante room. And I'm going to miss all the staff that works the hallways and the mail room, all of our public safety officials that work in this building. I'm going to miss Tommy. Tommy is a janitor that works in this building, and he does a fantastic job. And I'm going to miss the lady, and I wish I could remember her name right this second, but I'm blanking on it. But every night she comes in while I'm in my office and vacuums out the office, and I give her my trash can, and she takes it out, and she asks me, "Why are you still here?" And she laughs, and I laugh. But all of these people, regardless of the title that they hold, they're good people. They work hard, as many members of this body. But don't be obsessed with the title, whether you're a chairman or a janitor. You do your job well. That's what matters. I thank my public safety committee members. It's been a privilege to work with all of you. I feel like we've made some good policy decisions, and we've done it cooperatively. I thank those of you who have suffered through some of my practical jokes, pranks, and initiations. But again, it builds bonds of friendship. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity to speak to the entire House, my friends, my delegation members. We may do battle up here, but don't burn the bridges. And if I have or set fire to one of those bridges or more, I'm sorry. But I hope that I've spent some of my time here with a plank or two and a nail and a hammer rebuilding them. And I hope you'll do the same. With that, Mr. Speaker, it is time for me to go home and to be a full-time dad, husband, and lawyer instead of a part-time legislator. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Let's see, what's Clerk will read the caption to Senate Bill 15.
Senate Bill 15 to be titled an act to amend Article 27 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to loitering at or disrupting schools so as to require public and private schools to have performed certain threat assessments.
Chair recognizes the Chair of the House Education Committee, Chairman Jaspers, to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We in this building take school safety very seriously, and so do our schools, school board members, teachers, parents, and everybody around it. You know, there's a lot going on right now, and there has been for a long time, in improving school security. Ever since Columbine, school safety has been important, and recent events have really had it on our mind. That's why last year we had 2 study committees that were looking at school safety, one in the Senate, one in the House. Heard lots of things, and I really want to thank the House members who were on the school